This week, hacking your pacemaker again, feeling bad after eating at Chipotle, quietly patching from Microsoft, NTP updates, radius caching, forgetting your password to avoid jail, turns out that doesn't work so well, and the shadow brokers make a move to a new subscription-based service for zero-day exploits. Jason Wood joins us today for expert commentary on ransomware and the Internet of Things. All that and more on this episode of Hack Naked News. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News. Brought to you by IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Access over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand for a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your account. Visit itpro.tv/hacknaked and use the code HN30. Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. Welcome, everyone, to Hack Naked News for Tuesday, May 30th, 2017. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, and I have a couple of announcements for you to get us started before we dip into the news. The Sans Pentest Hackfest Summit, that's right. If you didn't submit, you shouldn't have submitted. And that's definitely a graphic for B-Sides Kampala, which I don't have the information for, but you should totally check out and Google search for B-Sides Kampala, which is happening in Uganda, and the folks that are organizing it are awesome. So you should go there and do stuff, and we'll have more information on the next program. Also, in announcements this week, we've got, if I can fast forward to it quickly enough, Wild West Hackin' Fest, of course. Wild West Hackin' Fest is put on by Black Hills Information Security, and it is going to be an awesome hands-on time for information security professionals on October 27th through the 28th, where you will have talks from Dave Kennedy, Deviant Egypt, Chris Nickerson, Chris Gates, Mike Poor, Sub-T, and more. Visit them on the web at wildwesthackinfest.com. That's HACKIN fest.com. On to the news for this week. Thousands of known bugs found in pacemaker code. Researchers Billy Rios and Dr. Jonathan Butts from security company Whitescope said their study showed serious challenges pacemaker manufacturers face in trying to keep devices patched and free from bugs that attackers could exploit. They found that a few of the manufacturers encrypted or otherwise protected data on the device when it was being transferred to monitoring systems. Also, none were protected with the most basic login name and password systems or checked that devices they were connecting to were authentic. It should be noted that the late Barnaby Jack presented research on this topic for pacemaker security back in 2012. Chipotle. The headline, of course, from the Register reads, "Hackers did to our registers what our burritos did to your colon." I thought that was the headline of the week. Gotta love the Register for their headlines. Fast food chain Chipotle says hackers infected point-of-sale terminals to gain access to card data from stores in 47 states and Washington, D.C. The self-described Mexican Grill says the malware was active earlier this year from March 24th to April 18th. So if you ate at Chipotle, then my batteries just died on my reader. That's okay. If you ate at Chipotle during those dates, then you are probably okay health-wise, probably not okay in terms of your credit card. So the malware searched for track data, which sometimes has cardholder name in addition to the card number, expiration date, and internal verification code. The interesting thing is Chipotle says there was no indication that other customer information was affected However, the track data has the customer information on it. I'm not sure. That was PR hand-waving at its finest. Microsoft has quietly patched another critical protection engine flaw. Microsoft quietly patched a vulnerability on Wednesday, which is an additional vulnerability in the malware protection engine. The vulnerability was found on May 12th by Google Project Zero team. Tavis Ormandi thrown in the mix again, who said an attacker could have crafted an executable that, when processed by the malware protection engine's emulator, could enable remote code execution. Unlike a May 9th emergency patch for Google, researchers called the worst Windows vulnerability in recent memory. This week's bug comes at you compliments of Microsoft, silently fixed. This feature will no longer require, as the information contained in the packets used to fingerprint and track a client. Oh, sorry, I'm reading from the wrong story. So that was Tavis Ormandi who privately disclosed this bug to Microsoft. The Internet Engineering Task Force has enabled a new standard for NTP, which has what I'm deeming as a small win. So the Internet Engineering Task Force has taken another step to protect everyone's privacy, this time making Network Time Protocol a bit less spaffy, according to the news. The Internet Draft published last week called for changes in the NTP clients, and devs will be pleased to hear that it won't be difficult to implement. As the draft explains, the NFC that defines NTP, which I'm sure everyone has read, right? You spent time reading the RFC for NTP. It's fascinating bedtime, put you to sleep reading. So NTP have a convenience feature. Packets going from the client to the server have the same set of fields that are being defined and sent between the client and the server. This feature will no longer be required as information is passing back and forth. It's not required that all those fields are there, which essentially could allow an attacker to fingerprint and track clients. Small wins. Small wins are still wins. So we're happy for this small win. A small not-so-win, a popular Radius server, Free Radius, has an exploitable TLS session caching bug. This caching bug, referred to as inner authentication, has been discovered in the popular Free Radius code, affecting versions FreeRadius 2.2.x. Deprecated version still included in some Linux distributions. All versions before 3.0.14 in the stable branch, and all versions in the February in development branches 3.1 and 4.0. In the meantime, you can protect yourself by disabling TLS session caching, if that actually works in your environment. Awfully polite hackers allegedly hijacked a mall billboard, putting up this message: "We suggest you improve your security. Sincerely, your friendly neighborhood hackers." The message allegedly read that along with a code that referenced a terrorist attack or an attack at a soccer game in the UK as well. This photo was first uploaded to Reddit on Sunday. This was displayed at Liverpool One, a shopping area in the UK. Nice attackers, perhaps. It could have been worse, like Goatsy worse. There's the image right there. Thankfully, it was just a friendly message from the attackers. No one from Liverpool One, however, was available for comment, which is weird. Anyway, forgetting your smartphone password in court could definitely land you in jail. On May 30th, 2 suspects accused of extorting the so-called Queen of Snapchat as part of a sex tape scandal are scheduled to appear in Florida court. But as wild as the premise sounds, primarily the accused need only to answer a simple question upon the visit. Miami-Dade Circuit Judge Charles Johnson wants an explanation as to why the defendants can't remember their passcodes on their mobile phones. If he doesn't believe them or they remain silent, the 2 suspects face possible contempt charges and indefinite jail time for refusing a court order to unlock their phones so prosecutors can examine text messages. In other crime news this week, the shadow brokers are getting into the subscription service business. So shortly after the leak of NSA exploit tools that enabled the spread of the WannaCry worm, as well as other worms as well, the shadow brokers hacking group promised to launch a monthly subscription service for more 0 days. Tuesday, it started offering some details. To get in on the action, shadow brokers require that subscribers send them $100 in Z or 100 Zcash cryptocurrency, or the equivalent of $21,000 per month. The group emptied its Bitcoin wallet yesterday and switched over to Zcash, though the group said it could require a different currency in the following month. If you can keep up with the currency, is getting a random batch of 0 days per month worth the $21,000? That'll be for you to decide. Up next, expert commentary with Jason Wood from Paladin Security on ransomware and the Internet of Things. But first, a word from our sponsors. You have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin. Welcome back, everyone, to Hack Naked News. I do have announcements for you. I definitely don't have a teleprompter yet. Hold on. Nope, it's definitely still upside down. Technical challenges here on the show today. We will get to announcements. I want to first introduce Mr. Jason Wood from Paladin Security. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. How are you doing today?
It's the beauty of live internet TV podcasting, Jason. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Well,
how are you?
I'm good, and stuff happens, so we'll all survive and move right along.
Stuff definitely happens. So what's going on? We covered this on the show last week on Paul Security Weekly, ransomware and the Internet of Things. So I'm curious to get your take on it, as the commentary that can happen on Paul Security Weekly is curmudgeon-y, drunken, a lot of different adjectives used to describe that commentary. So what did you think of Bruce Schneier's notion of ransomware and the Internet of Things article that he posted?
So, yeah, I looked at this and I thought, well, this is going to be kind of interesting because at least here in the U.S., we tend to get pretty excited either for or against government regulation anytime that gets brought up. And the article that Bruce has here, he basically ran through the different types of devices out there, and he's calling out the fact that, hey, look, we've got lots of market forces to create new things that do stuff, whatever that is. In my office, I've got, light switches being turned off and on and whatnot on a timer, and, I can control with my phone, crap like that. Toys, for example. And what's interesting about it is we have a lot of incentive to push things out here. New gadgets, right? But I suspect, and I think his point is that a lot of these manufacturers are releasing these new toys and gadgets and stuff like that, and really don't spend much time thinking about how we're going to maintain these things, and definitely not how we're going to protect them from bad things happening, such as ransomware being put on the devices. And so he sees this future where we're going to have thousands or millions of devices sitting out there that are going to be in various states of disrepair and whatnot, and with no connected to networks, with no due diligence done for security. He went into a number of examples in his post, but I was reading through it, and my initial reaction was I'm a little bit more on I'm not a big fan of regulation. You see where it gets involved, it causes problems, increases costs. Everybody, I'm sure here listening to the show, loves dealing with compliance, and a lot of that's driven by regulation. However, I think Bruce has got a pretty good point. I mean, you've got things like pacemakers, which you've talked about. I ran into another article by a gentleman on InfoSec Island named Asaf Atzman, who got into car security, and he made the comment that your average car has over 100 million lines of code involved in it now with all the different systems and whatnot. And they're only getting more and more connected. And we've seen examples of what can happen there with cars getting shut down on the freeway and things like that. And as he put it, cars are at a tipping point. The automotive industry is at a tipping point, and it's going to keep going. So, my first reaction was to push back on this a little bit, but I'll be honest, as I kicked it around and I thought about it, I think Bruce has probably got something here that we, typically when we get into safety issues, we don't do much about it until the government gets involved and starts forcing things down on us.
I mean, that's not necessarily true. I mean, Microsoft certainly came around to fixing a lot of their software bugs, and that was not because of regulation, but due to their customers complaining. And
right.
I think you're going to see. So my prediction is, I don't at this juncture, except for very specific industries. I think automotive and healthcare are going to lead the charge. I think in terms of regulation, right? Like regulation in that you must do these things.
Right.
I think that similar to PCI, in where it involves monetary stuff, you should do these things, right? I think the rest of the security is going to come largely from consumer demand, is consumers getting together and saying, no, we want you to have some level of security. I mean, that's essentially what Microsoft's customers have done. I think that's where we're going to see the separation. I think Bruce is really trying to boil the ocean in terms of having, there's going to be regulation for every single IoT device that's out there because there's going to be millions of things. I think we're going to see very small pockets of you must do regulation come in certain industries, and then I think the rest is largely going to be consumer driven, which is really concerning me, right? I think the consumers may still have a choice. I also think there's going to be a lot of awareness that needs to be done, and a lot of awareness that's going to have a natural progression. Just like people buy certain types of cars or houses or whatever due to safety issues, I think it eventually will progress to that point. I think that's a much longer and slower and painful way to go about security on those systems. So that's just
yeah, and I see what you're saying, and certainly I agree that it's like some examples I came up with were, safety regulations for cars. Well, automotive industry obviously is a huge place to have government regulation get involved. Aerospace, as we're putting more entertainment devices and stuff like that, we've heard about whether or not things are being adequately protected on the airplanes. That's an area definitely to see that regulation get involved. Healthcare, like you said,
right. But not in consumer equipment, right? So like your home appliances and alarm systems and thermostats. Because there are very few, from what I understand, very few regulations today. I mean, I'm sure there are regulations, right? And it's curious if there are regulations or guidelines or standards and what the penalty is for following or not following them, right? If I want to make a really crappy refrigerator, I can make a really crappy refrigerator. There's nothing that forces me to make a really good. Now, there is the UL, and we have seen some, like, I got to make sure my refrigerator doesn't catch fire inside of the home. So I think in that respect, there is a good model to go by, but those efforts are largely being batted around, and I don't think they'll gain as much traction because when a device is compromised, it's not necessarily putting anyone in danger directly as it would a fire, right? But I see those home appliances, hopefully someday we'll have better standards on those type of appliances with respects to TVs and washing machines and their security of those devices. It's going to take a long time, in my opinion.
Very possibly. And what I would expect to see, if regulations start heading down that path, one of the things that's interesting to me about IoT and just how it gets tossed. I mean, I love the name IoT because it can be anything, but as these devices are connected to networks and stuff like that, you could see some really unusual interactions that we just don't see at this point, until really the train wreck occurs. And then all of a sudden you start getting people jumping up and down saying, oh my goodness, we need to regulate this in some way because we had these unforeseen consequences. I don't think you're going to see anything right now for, webcams or anything like that because nobody's really going to get hurt. There's going to be some privacy things that people are going to be definitely concerned about. But overall, not a huge amount of regulation. But if you start getting the webcam interacting with the coffee maker and the refrigerator and your smart home hub and all this other stuff, and you start getting some really unusual and potentially damaging events occurring, then you could see, I think, some potential for that to come out in the consumer space. But like you said, it's going to be painful. And it'll be interesting to see whether it gets driven by the consumer side, where I don't want to deal with this because of these problems, or if the government gets involved and actually pushes something down.
Yeah, I'd love to see it be a market issue and have it become a market issue. In other words, maybe there are standards, ideally one standard, but that usually never happens, right? Where there's a minimum level of security that manufacturers must try to achieve, and that separates them out. But then you start getting the PCI model where it's like, okay, well, I got to pay to be compliant, and then that costs money. There needs to be some in between, I think. Maybe let the consumer choose, do you want that stamp of approval? How much is that stamp of approval really worth? I think that's largely why we haven't seen that, is it's difficult to enforce a minimum level of security, have a standard that actually means something. If it's not enforced, the more enforcement that you do, the more potential you have to impact the market and create those barriers to entry. So I personally, being very close to this issue in IoT device security specifically, I don't think it's a huge cost to implement a minimum basic security for these devices, such as firmware updating. That might be a little more costly, but usernames and passwords and buggy code that's from open source utilities from 10 years ago. To me, that stuff at a reasonable cost, you should be able to get rid of those bugs. And I hope that's to me is step one.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Because it is all over the place. I mean, you've got some pretty good quality devices, where folks are taking some thought around this. For example, some of the locks that are out, the smart home locks or front doors.
Ring has done a good job of pushing out firmware updates. They did have a vulnerability. They do a great job of managing their platform, I think, from what I've seen in the news. And I own a Ring, and it works really good. And security-wise, I haven't noticed huge issues. We talked about Netgear Arlo on the show. That's something that they fixed some stuff, but there's still some stuff out there remaining. Usability-wise, it's not as good as Ring, to be honest with you. But all these things I think are going to need some. I'd love to see some minimum level of security, but that's like a double-edged sword, certainly, as we learned from the PCI example. Although one of the positive things is the industry as a whole, retail, all the way through the card providers and whatever, did recognize a sense that security has to be part of it, and I think did help. We need something like that, I think, for IoT.
Yeah, well, whichever way it goes, I think it's definitely the manufacturer's best interest to start putting in a basic level of security, and getting some of the issues you're talking about, the just crappy code and passwords being handled badly and no encryption in places where it should have it. Getting that stuff taken care of, I don't think should be too costly, like you said. And at least if they start handling it on their own, it'll be a lot better than having some third party breathing down their necks to make it happen, because that is going to raise costs. That is going to make things more difficult.
And we've already seen
not to do it.
The FTC has filed suit against both Asus and I want to say Netgear. So some of that stuff's already happened. So the future will tell where we go with this issue. Jason, thank you very much for your commentary on this episode of Hack Naked News. That concludes the program for today. We'll see everyone next time. But before we go, IT Pro. Don't forget about our friends at IT Pro. IT Pro TV's courses now include Apple Certified Support Professional, CompTIA Security Plus, and ITIL Planning, Protection, and Optimization. Premium annual memberships include all video content as well as access to virtual labs and Q&A forums. You'd normally pay $85.70 a month or $857 per year. But if you're a Security Weekly listener or subscriber or viewer, you get 30% off. If you go to itpro.tv/hacknaked, use the discount code HN30, you will save 30% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. See you next time.